I'm so sorry. Right, have we got everyone in?
I think we did.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. For the first time since lockdown, my Wi-Fi crashed just as I went to speak. So my name is Charlotte Crosswell. I'm Chief Executive of Innovate Finance. I wish I was in the office today, but I am joined by Amrita Ajuha, CFO of Square, who I'm delighted to have with us today. Amrita, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Charlotte. And look, it's 2020. What else could go wrong? So don't worry about it.
We've had 5 weeks, so we've done quite well, but it hasn't been the best day today. And it's just great to have you here. We often have so many UK fintech leaders, and we're always very keen to hear from obviously global fintech leaders as well. And what a great one to start with you. Perhaps I'm sure that probably Square doesn't need any introducing, but I think just so make sure we are covered. Could you just maybe tell our audience today a little bit about Square and how it all came to be?
Sure. So Square was founded in 2009 and born out of the last recession with a purpose of economic empowerment, which is about bringing financial tools that used to be reserved for the privileged to a broader audience. What we saw and what we still believe to be true today is that our customers valued speed and trust. Trust, what does that mean? It means transparency, simplicity around fees and policies, not locking our customers into contracts. Speed means fast access to people's own money, fast access to credit, fast ability to onboard to new products. They were those attributes, speed and trust, were paramount pre-COVID, and they continue to be in this environment, obviously, as well. In terms of our business, we have two parts of our business. We address sellers, so small and medium-sized merchants, as well as individuals. On the seller side, we started a decade plus ago with the little white reader in the US, which you remember, the sort of iconic mobile reader that enabled accepting credit card payments to so many small businesses that didn't have access to that before. And we've now built an ecosystem of dozens of tools, products, services around that across payments, hardware, software, financial services to help entrepreneurs, small businesses start, run, and grow their business. We operate in 4 markets on the seller side of the house, outside of the US, including the UK, Canada, Australia, and Japan. And we're working hard to launch all of our products and build our brand in those 4 markets, as well as potentially others down the road. Those 4 markets represent about 11% of the seller business's gross processing volume in the third quarter, up from 6% 2 years ago. So the growth in those markets continues to outpace the US market, and we're excited about the prospects there. The other part of the house for us is Cashout, which we launched. It's a mobile peer-to-peer money transfer service. We got started in the US back in 2013 and has been growing since in a sort of explosive fashion. Today, we have over 30 million monthly transacting active customers across products like peer-to-peer money transmission, Cash Card, which is a direct a debit card, a prepaid debit card with instant rewards, and investing like in Bitcoin and in equities. And the purpose for Cashout is enabling people to redefine their relationship with money by making it more relatable, available, and accessible. And Cashout is available in the US for peer-to-peer in the UK for peer-to-peer transactions, as well as cross-border transactions between the UK and the US. And we're excited about further international expansion for Cashout as well.
That's great. I mean, what an incredible journey, and I think we all know the little reader, but it's great to hear a bit more about it. Often on this series, what we try to do is we also like to find out a bit about the person behind the company as well. In your journey to Square, sort of some of the roles you've had, and just talk a little bit about that, and maybe I know listeners often like to hear about your mentors and supporters along the way as well, because fintech, there's no traditional way of coming into the sector. There's no formal training as such. So it'd be just great to hear your story.
Well, mine would certainly be non-traditional, I'd say, because I spent the vast majority of my nearly 20-year career now in a different space entirely, in digital media and entertainment. I worked at Disney, Fox, Activision Blizzard, which is a gaming company. I worked at Morgan Stanley and McKinsey, where I focused on tech and media as well, and went to business school along the way. When I met Square 2 years ago, though I knew nothing about payments and frankly, fintech, I was excited by our purpose and how aligned it was to our customers' success. With economic empowerment, as we're helping our customers grow, we're doing good. And ultimately, that'll come back in terms of rewards to the company and us doing well. So that alignment was really strong for me. And frankly, my first and most important mentors were my parents. They were small business owners, immigrants to the US from India and from Kenya. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which is, smack dab in the Midwest. And they started a business when I was one. It was a daycare center. So I literally grew up at my parents' business, and I got to see my mom be the boss, and her interaction with her clients, the parents, with growing the business, with loving the children, with caring for teachers over the years. And what always struck me as small business owners is that there's so much work behind the scenes. Every Thursday night, I remember my mom sitting at the kitchen table with paper and pencil, writing out the payroll and then handing her calculations to my dad, who would literally cut the checks so she could hand the checks to the teachers the next day. And, there was no easy mechanism for her to communicate with the parents at the daycare, that her clients, or to build marketing tools beyond classifieds in the newspaper and word of mouth. And I now think about all of the tools that Square and other companies like Square provide to small business owners in a way that, bringing those tools that were only available to sort of the enterprise customer, to small and medium-sized businesses, to entrepreneurs. And I think had my parents had that back then, maybe they could have gotten a night off every once in a while.
It's amazing, isn't it? When we look back and you think how much evolution we've had. I remember back in the 90s thinking this is just, what an incredible decade of innovation. And then you look at it then and look now where we are and then think, wow, where are we going in 10, 20 years time? It's just incredible. We don't really use checks over here. You still use them a little bit in the US, but we don't use them. And now CFO of Square is probably not like the CFO of a lot of companies you imagine around the world. What is your day-to-day job? And I'm sure it changes one day at a time, but what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I run a team at Square that crosses sort of the traditional CFO functions across finance, FP&A, accounting, tax, treasury, internal audit, et cetera, as well as teams like workplace, real estate, IT, that where the customers are really Square employees and enabling a seamless working environment. And as you can imagine, in times like this, where no one's in the office, and we literally have 5,000 offices now around the world because everyone's home office is a Square office effectively. It is a very dynamic environment for our team and enabling continued productivity and sort of general wellness for our employee base across the company. Our mission as a team is to enable bold growth at scale and to protect the company while finding new ways to serve our customers. The most strategic part of my job on a day-to-day basis is helping the company prioritize our efforts, ruthlessly prioritize our efforts in pursuit of enabling value to our customers. And then to calibrate that level of investment across all of those opportunities and across teams. And I think the second key aspect of this function at Square is our team has to be a risk finder. We have to find risks and mitigate them so we can protect Square and balance the needs of various stakeholders as we grow. And it's really when you do that you're enabled, that you can unlock bold growth, but not until you know what you're facing can you be bold in those efforts that you're making. And that's the job of the finance team, the people team, the legal team, to find those risks and try to mitigate them as much as possible so we can move quickly on behalf of our customers.
So yeah, it's fascinating. And let's move on to sort of Square, and a lot of talk about the purpose of economic empowerment. You talked about small businesses and how you grew up. And you also talked there about cryptocurrency and how it's instrumental in this. just would love to talk a bit more about sort of Square's purpose and your focus when it comes to that, and why you believe personal investing is so key.
Sure. So obviously Square believes that just as everyone should be able to participate in the economy, have access to tools and services, so too should everyone be able to participate in cryptocurrencies and have access to innovation in that space. We started back in 2018, and really sort of as an innovator in the Bitcoin space by enabling trading of Bitcoin through Cashout. So buying and selling of Bitcoin. Historically, Bitcoin and stocks have both been inaccessible and frankly confusing for the vast majority of people. And so our aim is to make it accessible and approachable in a way that it hasn't been before, also educating people along the way to protect them. On Cash App, customers can purchase Bitcoin, and they can also purchase traditional stocks. You can buy $1 of Amazon or Berkshire Hathaway. So that sort of fractional stock investing is something that's helped unlock, the market for people who frankly haven't had access before. With crypto specifically, we've also made a few moves to enable our learning in the space and experimentation in the space as it evolves, and contribute back into the broader crypto ecosystem. So last year we formed Square Crypto, which is an independent team whose sole focus is contributing to open source work in the Bitcoin space for the benefit of the broader community. We also launched the Cryptocurrency Open Patent Alliance, COPA, which is a nonprofit organization encouraging crypto innovation and the sharing of those inventions across companies and individuals. And then more recently, we announced that Square invested $50 million of our own treasuries into Bitcoin as a show of support for the community and a belief in the long-term sustainability of Bitcoin. Finally, even more recently this week, as part of our climate pledge, which we can talk about later, we launched a $10 million investment initiative to make the Bitcoin supply chain more green and more sustainable. So these are relatively modest steps for a company like Square to experiment along the way in the context of the scale of our company, but they serve our purpose of economic empowerment. They enable us to learn and to contribute to this fast evolving space.
I mean, and it's great to hear, that. I mean, obviously over here, and I'm sure it's the same there, especially with potential change of administration, everyone's talking about green, and, here we have COP26 next year. So we're increasingly seeing the fintech community come into, not move into green tech, just fintech becoming green tech, and some of the incumbent institutions really leveraging some of these solutions now. So I think it's going to be a really exciting year in 21. One thing I think, it's quite clear from you, you're very passionate about supporting minorities and underserved, and that's something that I believe that fintech is there for. It's not there just to put technology into banks. It's actually there to provide more choice and transparency, but also helping the unbanked, the underbanked, and even people who don't have access to digital, which is still a major issue here. Could you just talk about this? Because I know that's obviously one of the main reasons that Square came about, and what else you do in that area of supporting minorities.
Sure. So earlier this year, we announced a $100 million investment, again from our own treasuries, into underserved communities. This, again, driven by our purpose, economic empowerment, and our ongoing commitment to racial equity as well. We believe it's critically important to ensure access to financial services, not just reserved for those with privilege. With this investment, we hope to increase the speed and scale with which the organizations that we've partnered in a variety of underserved and minority communities around the U.S. can reach their constituents. This investment enables, minority-owned financial institutions, Black-owned financial institutions, to in turn put these funds into the hands of people who are investing and building in underserved communities through loans, development projects, and investments. And so we have a chance now to use our treasuries, our corporate treasuries, this $100 million represented at the time about 3% of our cash, to support sustainable economic growth in communities that have so long been overlooked. And frankly, these communities have been particularly impacted during COVID. So we see a real urgency here. And frankly, our purpose, which has been our purpose from day one of economic empowerment, is is all the more relevant and urgent in the environment that we're in today.
And I forgot to say that if anyone does have questions for Amrita, I think we hopefully will have some time at the end. I understand they're in the question box below your viewing window. Hopefully if you're on the same platform that we are using, the same screen, so please do feel free to put them in. Let's talk about COVID, and I'm sure you, like everyone around the world, has now moved to a world of 30-minute Zoom and Teams meetings, and but obviously it changes day-to-day work, and I'm sure you're no different to the rest, especially with the impact on merchants. Could you just talk about that and what's happened over the last unbelievable 9 months? And the impact of that on Square and and obviously the Cash App, but just how you've evolved your business and how it's affected your business as well this year.
Sure. On the seller side of the house, I'll start there and then share Cash App. On the seller side of the house, we've seen two big trends: the acceleration of e-commerce and the acceleration of cashless. Frankly, the importance of these software and tools that we provide for SMBs and for entrepreneurs has only become greater in times like this, where you have to pivot and adapt and be creative and use different tools to enable that in a frictionless, easy, fast way. It's sped up the need for more frictionless selling and buying from sellers to their buyers. And in frankly, the 3 months at the start of COVID, we saw the demand for features like curbside pickup and Square Checkout, which are features that bridge channels between online and offline. In 3 months, achieve levels we thought could happen over 3 years. Globally, we're seeing existing and new sellers transition from in-person sales to online commerce that drove strong growth in Square Online, our products around online. Our online gross processing volume grew 50% year over year in the second and third quarter. And in the international markets that we serve, the 4 markets outside the US, they grew even faster, 60% in Q3. And so clearly there is a great need that we're seeing businesses have to be able to meet their buyers in new channels. And from a cashless perspective, we recently put out the UK cash and pandemic report. And in there, you can see some key stats, but we saw 31% of businesses move to cashless by mid-July, up from just 8% at the start of 2020. And, the food and drink sector was one that sort of led the way there. 33% of those businesses were cashless by mid-July. And we similarly saw a drop in cash payments in July of this year. Fewer than 1 in 4 in-person payments were now being made through cash, around half of the pre-COVID levels, as businesses and consumers alike are looking for that sort of contact-free and more hygienic way to transact. One example to give you would be Kaya, a co-working cafe in Brixton, which initially switched to Square to offer that click and collect with Square Online that we offer to customers at the start of the lockdown. And they're now running their business online and in person with Square because of Square point of sale integration with their accounting platform. And so now we are seeing increasingly that our online channels are a front door into Square in a way that you may have thought of Square before as sort of offline and enabling businesses to do in-person transactions. We're increasingly being seen as an online home for businesses as well. And for marrying those two channels, as those businesses want to have a 360-degree view of their customers, wherever that customer is transacting or coming into them. From a Cash App standpoint, we've also seen dramatic change during this time, during COVID. And in particular, in the early days, through the early days of COVID, I should say, the onset of the pandemic in the US with the disbursement of stimulus funds and then unemployment funds, Cash App was a seamless way for individuals to direct deposit into their accounts so that they weren't waiting weeks and potentially months for paper checks in the US. So that disbursement of the funds through the CARES Act and the unemployment benefits was a key way that, again, people could get fast access. We know that speed really matters here. And so for each of those products across Cash App, we've seen an uptick in growth post-COVID as people want that seamless integrated way to be able to manage those funds across the ecosystem that we offer, given the speed and the frictionless ease with which all of those features are integrated through Cashout.
And how much is the access to cash debate live in the US? Because obviously you'll be seeing it, and you're getting some incredible statistics there. And it's a big debate in the UK as people go cashless, but obviously that still leaves people behind. How much of a debate is that in the US, and how much do you see that the comparison with the UK and other markets?
Yeah, we feel that there will continue to be a reason to use cash for, in some instances, some use cases for some particular people. And our systems enable that as well. But we do think that with the broader dissemination of cards and digital technologies like Cash App, that over time we'll see that secular shift, and that Square can be a part of enabling that. Certainly in a time like this, we see that there are, again, health and hygiene reasons that you want to enable those contactless experiences. And so our view is that we want to be a part of making those experiences and that secular shift more available and more broadly accessible to demographics that frankly have been underserved by the sort of card experiences in the past. We want to be a part of the answer as that shift naturally happens.
Yeah, it's the transition, isn't it? I think it's interesting. The Nordics have we've been there for quite some time, and and I think we see in the UK just an incredible opportunity to leverage some of the move to fintech, and certainly this year. But clearly we have to go find provisions for those in the interim as well. And I think it'd be interesting to see some of the fintech solutions as we talk about recycling cash here through shops. So if banks are closing down or you haven't got an ATM nearby, how we can actually find some tech solutions that sort of go through the stages. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So looking to the future, and and as I said, crystal ball's pretty tough compared to this year, and what's going to happen next year. But just be really interested in your views on that sort of macro view of the future, and the needs of people and business owners. And you've talked about the transition you've seen over 20 years, and what that's going to look like in terms of buying, selling, and money management.
Sure. We believe that there's two meta themes that have the potential to disrupt commerce and potentially other fields in the future. Those two themes are, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and cryptocurrency and blockchain, some of which we've talked about. Why do we think those are disruptive? Why do we think that those are opportunities for us? On the first, with AI and ML, we believe that those sorts of technologies will enable companies and their employees to be more efficient. So potential to 4x revenues while only 2xing employees, because you're giving those employees greater tools and resources to be able to do their work. And we also think that AI and ML will give us, and those technologies will give us and other fintech companies the opportunity to launch products around industries that have been primarily centered around paper and pencil. And have been narrowly restricted because of inadequate risk models, and because of not knowing as much about your customer and their business, and therefore not being able to open up the funnel to provide access to those tools and services to more people. So we see that as a meta theme that crosses multiple areas, even frankly beyond fintech. And again, we want to build capability, expertise, learning, so that we can be positioned to provide that value to our customers longer term. On crypto and blockchain, we believe the verifiability, the transparency of blockchain technology and cryptocurrency will be disruptive. First, potentially as an asset like gold, and potentially down the road as a currency. There's lots of needs that happen between now and then. There's a lot of things that need to change in terms of the ecosystem around crypto, in terms of the speed of transmission of transactions, and in terms of the understanding for broader demographics of people around it, and of course in terms of how various governments can interact and leverage. But there are attributes here to be disruptive in the markets that need it most, and in particular where there is inflation or corruption that's rampant with fiat currency. We see an opportunity And again, we know that it could change dramatically. There's no way to paint the future for what 10 years down the road looks like. But we're making small moves and small experiments in this space to be able to be positioned to learn and grow and pivot as we see things take shape.
And just let's talk about, before we move to questions, just talk about talent. And I'm sure it must be an issue for, obviously you're seeing this in the international world, but in the US as well. How much are you struggling to attract talent there? How competitive is it against some of the Valley? But also, do you think we are in a global race for talent? Be interested in sort of your split and how some of the huge issue for fintechs over here. It's growing so fast, just can't get enough people quick enough.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, this is part of the reason that we, even pre-COVID, had been on a path to distribute our workforce around the world, to look for pockets of talent in areas that had been previously, under explored from a tech or fintech perspective, but where we saw great hubs of, talent coming out of universities or a better style of living that people would be attracted to move to. And what that would enable us to do by creating a more distributed workforce is time zones become a friend rather than a hindrance. Access to that talent and competition for that talent is not centered around sort of the winning cities, the Bay Area or New York or London or whatever, but is more broadly disseminated across communities. And so we had been on this path pre-COVID as well to bring collaborative software tools into our day-to-day work at the company, such that there was no real hub. There was no fear of missing out if you weren't at headquarters, and I think obviously COVID has only accelerated that, not only for us, but for every company around the world. And I do think that this is an area for us to explore even post-COVID, even when it is safe for all of us to be back in an office. I think we want to continue to ensure that we're tapping talent in regions, locations around the world to enable to help those communities grow and to enable to ensure that we have the potential to grow our workforce over time as well.
Yeah. Well, if we can't crack it now to show that we can all work from home and we've all been traipsing into offices and rush hour commute, then we'll have missed a huge opportunity.
I definitely don't miss my commute, I have to say.
No, I miss the office.
There are parts of the office I for sure miss, that social interaction, absolutely. But I do think that will come back in some ways. We've surveyed our employees. We find about 15% of them want to work from home permanently afterwards. About 15% want to be back in the office 5 days a week. And the remaining about 70% have said, we'd love a more flexible experience where we can be in the office a few days, 2-3 days a week, and we can work from home when we need more focused work. And so we at Square want to be able to enable that. We want people to work where they feel most creative and ultimately, seek to measure things like productivity rather than face time in the office.
Yeah. I'm still trying to work out if we're productive or not outside. Everyone says you're productive, but then every internal meeting is 30 minutes as well as every external one. Where I miss the 2-minute conversations across the office as well.
Yeah.
So just moving to some of our questions now. Some of them quick, some of them we'll have a bit of a chat about. Quick one here. So we're a blockchain company, black owned, with an innovative solution to serve the unbanked. And Square's our potential customer. We're trying to work out how to connect with anyone in the Square team. And how do they do that? Do you have a partnership team, or who would you suggest they go to?
We do have a partnership team. We actually have potentially a couple teams that a company like that would be able to reach out to. At this point, I'd say send them my way, Charlotte, and then I can funnel them to the right people.
There you go. Amrita's not offering to do that, so you can find her on LinkedIn.
I'll be the sales lead for that one.
There you go. See. Reference this one. Have you got any plans? We're talking about Cashout. Are there any plans for Square to offer cross-border payments?
So we do offer cross-border between the UK and US today. That's peer-to-peer transmission. When you think about cross-border more broadly between businesses or beyond the US and UK, I think that is an area of exploration for us. It all comes down to the priority set that you've got and where you want to focus. But I do think that that's a potential for us down the road.
Thank you. So can you emphasize the role of the CFO in scaling the business, which many overlook? That's a great question.
It's a great question. And it's one that we think about all the time. Our business, frankly, grows so quickly that that we sometimes surprise ourselves and need to be ready for that growth before we even launch something, in anticipation of the growth that may come. But you want to also be nimble. There's sort of a spectrum of building it and seeing what happens, or building ahead for the anticipated growth and then being ready to scale as things come. And I would say that each company is going to find its own way to calibrate. If you're on the former end of the spectrum, where you're sort of building and seeing what happens, what that enables you to do is move quickly, right? You can build lots of things and iterate as you go. The downside to that being that if you're surprised by your growth and then you can't handle the volume, your systems aren't scalable, your compliance methods, customer service, et cetera, then that could be a real problem, especially in the fintech space. On the other end of the stream, if you're waiting to launch products until you have all of the T's crossed and I's dotted, then that sometimes slows teams down. And so you've got to find the right spot along the spectrum, depending on where you are as a company and what the expectations are. For us, we're a public company where parts of our business are regulated, and so we put a high bar on our ability to serve our customers. And that is certainly the CFO's job. That's also our chief legal officer and many other people around the company, and thinking about anticipating the needs that could be around the corner.
That's great advice. So now we'll probably ask this by someone in the finance team, I'd say. So what are the most important processes and metrics you use to make sure your finance team serves as a strategic partner for new product and business development, and business partners in their forward-looking activities?
It's a great question. I think of our FP&A team that partners with the business. I think of them as wearing two hats. They wear the hat of a business advocate, and I want their business partners to see them as an extension of their team, as part of their own sort of right arm. But they also wear the Square Inc. hat. They also wear have to see all of their initiatives from the lens of what's the right thing to do from a fiduciary perspective for the company, and how would I weigh this initiative against others that I know are going on across the company. And that's a balancing act. Having to see your initiatives both as an advocate and then as sort of a cross-company arbiter is a balancing act that this team and so many other teams that are embedded in the business have to play. And then secondly, what I would say in response to that question is it's important that these teams have the right tools, technology, and services. So I'm talking now for our internal teams, not just what we provide to customers, so that they have the ability to automate as much as possible the manual work, such that they can have the time to be strategic, be good business partners, be anticipating what could be down the road. And that's something that we are always iterating on as a company, but I'm particularly focused on that now, especially during times like this where we're all outside of the office. I want to make sure that all of our teams internally have the tools they need and the broadly disseminated insights so that we can distribute decision making and automate the manual stuff, and then be as strategic as possible on the new areas of the business or the areas that are continually dynamic.
A lot more about growth here. So we've seen a booming companies going public this year in the US, and see with Airbnb. I'm reading out the question here. So as a public market darling, and one of the few publicly traded fintechs, what are some of the lessons for fintechs who are looking to list? And that's a great question, because we have, and I know it's the same in the US, that we now have a pipeline of fintechs who are unicorn status, all looking to raise significant capital, working out private versus public. What would be your advice to those?
So what I would say is being public is a great feedback mechanism. We have the chance every quarter, multiple points throughout the quarter, to interface with our shareholders and potential shareholders, to seek their feedback, to see where there are areas where we're not moving fast enough, there are areas that we shouldn't be focused on. And that continual feedback loop it actually, if you use it in the right way, can make you better as a company. But the other thing that I would say is to take all of that feedback with a grain of salt. You've got to stay true to your purpose. You've got multiple stakeholders beyond investors, employees, customers, partners, regulators, and you got to balance all of that. And stay long-term focused. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day gyrations of the stock market. But what you're focused on is the long-term arc. And sometimes the things that you're working on will not have a splashy press release or will not have, the impact in the near term. But if you get them right, will have impact longer term, much greater impact. And so, I tell our employees all the time, and our leadership team, we remind ourselves to not get caught up in where the stock price is today, but where we're headed longer term. If we do right by our customers, that will pay dividends, we know, for the company and for the stock over time.
Yeah. And then, back to that, so as a founder-led business, obviously we see a lot of founder-led businesses move to putting a different CEO in place. You obviously still have Jack at the helm. And how does that shape your culture? You think that's changed, being still founder-led?
Absolutely. I mean, look, to have someone who is there from the beginning, who feels our purpose deeply, who is an owner operator, who is a long-term focused, is incredible as to be a part of a team like that, where those are the principles by which we all lead. Now, I will say that it is Jack's goal that we are a 5,000-year-old company one day. We outlast any one of us as individuals. And so our focus is to try to abstract some of these principles into institutional learning so that we're not dependent on any one person, not dependent even on a founder. And I think that is a key goal that Jack has, that we have as a business, to ensure sustainability longer term. But absolutely, for where I sit today, working every day with a founder, having that agency, that urgency, that owner-operator mentality is something that we very much get to benefit from.
That's great. And then, if I can, I'm going to ask you one more question. Thank you for sharing the story about your parents' business, and I think it's always great to hear people talk about that and saying how much you've accomplished at a young age. Can you just talk about perhaps about a setback in your career? We always have listeners who want to hear how to overcome challenges, and anything you can think of from that, and what you learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, look, you could look at, it depends on how you want to define setback. You could look at sort of the regular ups and downs in any job, and think about, again, the long-term focus. So one thing that comes to mind is, look, I think an earlier question called us a stock market darling. I would not say that was the case last year. We had ups and downs last year, and we've had other ups and downs even before that, right, as a company. And so there were moments last year where it was very trying. And as a CFO, I feel that responsibility of communicating our story to the street. But again, it takes tough skin, thick skin, and it takes persistence. And it also takes adapting in that environment, in that experience, to be able to say sort of like, what is misunderstood about what we're doing as a company? And what should we be doing differently to then tell our story in a way that actually people understand? It's simpler, it resonates, people get it. And I do think that's resulted in some of the change that you've seen in terms of how we report our business, in terms of the segment reporting, in terms of the stories that we tell, to make it more clear who we are as a company. So that's one example. There are probably 1,000 of those throughout any given day, let alone in a year. But again, it comes down to being mission-led and having a long-term focus to get you through those bumps in the road.
Yeah, that's great. Amrita, I can't believe how much our time has flown past, not helped by my complete Wi-Fi reboot to start us off. But I just want to say how grateful I am for you sharing your story. I think people love hearing the story about the company, but they love hearing the stories about the people behind the company. And and as you said, some of your views on founder-led business and the maniacal prioritization I've heard before of founder-led businesses, of trying to focus on the journey ahead. And and it's going to be incredible to watch your space as you go into next year, and coming out of COVID, and how that's going to change as well. And we're certainly very excited to continue that conversation with you. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was a great discussion, and thank you for having me.
No, it's great. And so for those, for our next session, we are going to take a break for Christmas. I hope everyone else is time to take a break for Christmas. I think we all need to definitely have a week or two off. Our next session will be on Tuesday, 19th of January at 9:30 a.m. UK time with Rishi Khosla, who is Chief Executive and founder of Oak North. So we look forward to continuing this series. But for now, thank you, Amrita, and we look forward to catching up with you next year.
Thank you.